Hello and welcome to Fiddler Green podcast number 67, The Wonderful Life. I regret to inform the audience that once again I appear to be under the weather. I'm so under the weather I don't even have the display slide up. Not that I had much time to write them. But I guess this is just what happens. It seems like over Thanksgiving, there was the flu going around, and now there's another strain of it going around. There's always kind of the traditional flu, and then the COVID strain variety of the flu. So you basically have two flu seasons every year. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. I was traveling, and I really want to make an effort in this podcast to always do it every other Tuesday. That way, I have another podcast that I am doing with the Redwood Society of California that's going to be more of an interview podcast. It's going to have guests that might be pre-recorded, whatever. That is a side project that I've always wanted to do, focused on community building. This one is obviously just more of my own thoughts, but I still, originally I used to do these Fiddler Green podcasts whenever I felt I had a topic to talk about. But, most of the time I had this idea that I wouldn't do podcasts if I hadn't completed an essay. And unfortunately, since I've been traveling so much, I haven't been able to finish. I've started a ton of essays. I haven't finished any of them. And so I'm a little bit behind in that dimension. But, it really, for a podcast for the audience, I think it's good to have them in a regular cadence. And moreover, I always have a topic to talk about. There's always something to say, even if I want to steer away from the topic that I'm currently doing a piece about because I don't want to double dip. There's always something that needs to be kind of underlined or that feels critical about the season that we're operating within. And this being Christmas, I think I can say Merry Christmas now to the chat. This is indeed, I mean, again, I consider Christmas to start on Christmas Eve. And here we are sitting at the vigil of Christmas Eve. If you are on, good Lord, if you're on the East Coast, I guess you already are in Christmas Eve, right? I'm basically on East Coast time anyway. Not that I don't work on East Coast time. I was literally in New York the other day. It's funny going through New York. I always just I have a love hate. It's difficult because I feel like I have much more of a love hate relationship with New York City than I do with San Francisco. With San Francisco, I'm just so irritated with the leadership of California and the people that manage the city that I can't divorce myself from that disapprobation, so to speak. And I just end up kind of having a lot of contempt for the city and just all the Bay Area generally. It feels kind of unhuman to me in a weird way, even though, I've lived there at several points in my life and I live near there now. But with New York City, I always feel like you're crawling through this amazing example of Americana, of ancient American culture, and it's kind of preserved an aspect. The city is, I mean, it's got tons of problems. It's a lot better than it was. It's a lot better than it was even when I first started living in New Jersey in 2021. It was, it was really rough, and I guess it got cleaned up. And maybe people say that Zoran Mamdani's reign is going to plunge the city back into chaos. Certainly, his first few weeks in office or a month in office haven't been very promising, but we'll see. This is leftist governance, but just I was traveling for business, but you get a chance to kind of walk around the city. And it's all these little things that you remember from movies, and you've seen them every time you come into the city, but now you see them again. And everyone's kind of lined up around the block to see these little tourist attractions in Times Square, Rockefeller Center, St. Patrick's Cathedral. And it's a nice little experience. But again, it is also alienating to a degree because, like everything, there's this feeling of it being a copy of a copy, of being a product first of our entertainment products, and then only secondarily from our experience. Someone told me that they were born in Manhattan recently, and I kind of did a double take. I didn't know people were born in Manhattan. It's hard. I mean, people used to they used to be born in Manhattan, live their entire lives in Manhattan, or and these days, Manhattan is a place that you move to in your 20s and then move right out of because the place is just inhospitably expensive. My mother was born in San Francisco. I can't think of how many people are born in how many people are starting families in San Francisco. That doesn't seem. I mean, maybe South San Francisco. I don't know. It doesn't seem like things that people do anymore. But every time you go to these cities and all the places that people remember, the big things, the Natural History Museum, the NBC Studios in Rockefeller Center, they're all and they're always playing the little Christmas jingles. There's basically like two or three stages of Christmas jingles. And the first stage is obviously the traditional Christmas carols, which are variations on classical music. Some of them are like you can pick them back to Thomas Tallis or whatever, right? But most of them properly come from the 18th and 19th century. The sort of the rise of the middle class and the caroling culture was founded, like the Holly and the Ivy, all of those classics. Oh Christmas Tree, Oh Tannenbaum. That's a German variety. That was my grandmother's favorite. We sung it. I didn't. No one spoke German except her and my mother. Really, we sung it in German and English, and all of these things they come from the 18th and 19th century. That's the original era, and then there's this second era of Christmas carols that are, and it's kind of funny. They're all written. They're all written between like 1928 and 1959. This would be the classic Americana era, and all of these Christmas carols, they're all more or less secular, and they're almost all written by Jewish people, specifically Jewish people who come from New York. So when you're listening to these carols, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or Frosty the Snowman, and a variety of the other secular ones, it's not a big deal, right? I mean, people always like, oh, people always sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at ball games, but the guy who wrote that also, I think, was a New York Jew. He hated baseball very famously, so I mean, it's not a big deal. But it is something that you kind of, playing into my previous theme, you kind of become supremely aware that everything memorable. Now they're playing these Christmas carols with a lot of scare quotes. The ones from the 20th century, the mid 20th century ones. And there's a third period of Christmas carol writing that occurs post the 60s, where you get all of like the countercultural ones like Jingle Bell Rock and Feliz Navidad and all that stuff. And that's a separate category. I wouldn't be surprised if most people who wrote those songs were Jewish too. I'm sure that there's an infographic that makes a big point of that as well, circulating online. But the point is not whether people are Jewish or not, or whether these songs are religious or secular. It's just when you're walking through New York City, uh, you're kind of aware that the last time that there were kind of organic memories built in this place that weren't part of her professional class was kind of in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when Rockefeller Center got its reputation as being this cultural hub, when there were actually a lot of genuine worshipers in St. Patrick's Cathedral. I mean, there's a little bit of a revival of religiosity in New York City and Brooklyn. I don't know if they're traveling all the way to St. Patrick's Cathedral, but this is when all these things were happening, when this place was a place that interpersonal relationships were happening, and not just where professionals hung up their boots trying to make it big on the waiting pad on the staging area of Wall Street, or the staging area of Rockefeller Center, or trying to audition for a Broadway play or something like that. When these places were genuine places that you would have a mixture of classes and a mixture of age groups and a mixture of people wanting things differently. That is what created these spaces in New York that kind of made the city special. The idea of New York was that it was a place where people lived, but also a place where big things happened. And now it's just kind of like a tribute to a place where big things happened. I mean, what's going on in New York now? I mean, it's a beautiful city. I love the Art Deco design, but it does feel like it's just preserved an aspect. And I know, like, oh wow, you hit the most touristy places of the city, and now you're coming back with the impression that the city is touristy. But you can kind of tell. You can kind of tell with all of these things. Like when I was in Istanbul, oh my God, it was almost like 15 years ago or something like that. It just another lifetime ago. What it always felt like in Istanbul was that there was this burgeoning populist energy that was on the eastern side of the city. And then there was like the tourist thing that's locked in aspect that is just like a party place for drunk Russians and Europeans to, try their hand at Turkish delight or whatever else. And then the beautiful Aegean Sea and the Bosphorus Strait and all that, the Golden Horn. So I mean, you can get a sense of the city even as a tourist, and New York sleepeth. Hopefully, she will waketh again. But that was my trip. The trip went for business. Contracted some strange disease, although I might have just gotten this from my kid, and did a bunch of useless business parties. And I hate the Christmas parties. I hate the corporate Christmas parties. Y- Oftentimes you get great conversations, but it's so artificial. There's just this weight of formality. You can't relax, and everyone's telling you to relax, and you can't relax because the environment is just so stifling. But either way, and I told my wife I'd mention this, that the whole weekend would have gotten ruined because my bag was at the airport. Somebody walked off with it and disappeared into the night. We were about to make a quick connecting flight, and of course, this bag had all of these like laptops in it, a bunch of suits, thousands of dollars. It would have been a headache to replace at work. I was just, oh my God, my week is ruined. I'm going to have to spend the next 2 days in meetings trying to recover all of the data or account for it and writing up reports about stolen items and talking on the phone with airport security. My wife, out of the blue, and this is sort of my Christmas miracle for the year, she while I'm kind of sitting in line, the fourth line, trying to, and the security, this for once in a lifetime, right? This isn't the security's fault. I mean, the bag's stolen, but it's not a willful stealing. Like I had a black bag and I tied a pink ribbon around it, and then someone else tied a red ribbon around an identical bag, and they were right next to each other, which statistically speaking, for someone who travels a lot, that isn't, I probably should have distinguished the bag a lot more. But someone was walked off, and this is a big hub, right? It could be anywhere. My wife, while I'm just sweating bullets, cursing under my breath, she walks off and just has the intuition that the bag is at a certain connecting gate. And sure enough, the guy who had taken my bag mistakenly was there with the bag, and she just walks up, grabs the bag, and comes right back miraculously. I mean, again, I was in the back of the plane. The guy who grabbed my bag was in the front. They had to rearrange the luggage. That thing could have been halfway across the entire airport at the time. And something about some mystical force came down to my wife, and she just knew where it was. It's kind of amazing. The story doesn't really have a point, I guess, other than to kind of be aware that there are purposes that are operating kind of beyond us. I was thinking, it was kind of a mistake to bring my wife along on a business trip, even though it's kind of like there's a Christmas party attached to it, because it's a big waste of time. But if she hadn't been there, then I would have spent the last 3 days trying to account for all of this lost material and having to buy three more suits. And my wife attributes this miracle to female intuition, and certainly that is the case. Female intuition. I only have to deal with male fortitude because, again, I hate to. It's like the second one of these streams where I'm coming down with a flu, and having to do this 2 hour presentation, or it might be a little bit short tonight. Everyone's kind of easing into the Christmas spirit here. Everyone is getting ready to wrap presents. All I have to say, just I love shopping for presents for kids, but again, talk about things that are frozen in aspect. Every toy is a more expensive version of a toy that was available when I was a kid. the IPs are all the same. The toy brands are all the same. Uh, and so it just there's just more people grabbing at them now. There's more people grabbing at them, and it's a little bit frustrating because at the same time you have this sensation that we the middle class are noticeably becoming poor, so we're buying all of these toys for our children's Christmas, and in the back of our minds it's always wondering, okay, so my parents were buying toys like way in excess of the toys they had growing up as children, especially my father, who grew up in like a village in 1930s, Eastern Europe or wherever, right? But we're buying, they were buying toys that were way fancier than the ones they had, and here we are buying toys that are the same ones that we had at inflated prices, trying to reconstruct the Christmas of our childhoods. I don't think it's successful. I don't think we shouldn't be doing that. But then there's always at the back of your mind and always nagging at you. This is the dogging spirit that just poisons everything. Poisons everything that I go through in these sacred moments. Is you get the sense that someone's going to take this away from you. That the high standards of living that we possess right now are going to be seized from us. I mean, they already are being seized from us to a certain extent. Obviously, the article that I'm not going to talk about tonight because I'm trying to write a Substack article on it, and I don't want to double dip. The article that everyone's talking about right now is Jacob Savage's The Lost Generation, in which which the author, among many others, is he's repeating a common observation that's been in the data since 2021. But for whatever reason, Jacob Savage wrote the article that seems to have broken it into the consciousness of our ruling classes. And that is just the extent of the damage that racial preferences have done to millennials and, well, at least older Zoomers that were in the job market or trying to break into a career between 2008 and 2025. The doors just slammed shut, especially after 2015. And now all these organizations they're just not admitting almost any people from this cohort. An entire generation is locked out of professional expression. And that is, again, we everybody knew this. That is one thing that we have to keep in mind. Everybody knew this. My friend Jeremy Carl wrote a whole book about this. This is a known fact. This is not surprising. But having it confirmed now in everyone's mind, it just, this was never supposed to be able to happen. Every person in our side of doing these things in dissident politics or in politics generally, we've got like two modes of existence. And the first mode of existence is, well, I guess maybe three if you include work, right? I'm a wage cuck. I go to work, I put on the happy corporate face, whatever, right? We do the corporate HR Dave that goes to the office remotely or sometimes via business travel. And then you have the Dave Green that appears on these live streams and that writes at Substack and that speaks at OGC events, and we're looking in these spaces at kind of the clouds on the horizon or the storms that are raging over our heads. But then you put away the stream, you walk away from the computer, even me, right? And you want to go and you want to do something with the family, or you want to do something that's even relaxing and self-indulgent. Like you want to celebrate a Christmas with the kids, or you want to, I don't know, do something really stupid like play a game of Blood Bowl or whatever. And the problem with all of this is that in order to enjoy those things, you kind of have to convince yourself that all of the bad things that are going on and that you're aware of, that in some ways, like the boomers are right. In some ways, the boomers think that the real world is the world. So when you walk into New York City And the New York City's story about itself is like, we are a vibrant place where real people live, where big things are happening. And when you walk into Rockefeller Center, you're walking into like the center of cultural, the center of cultural creation. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And the same thing is true in any of its events. But you know that in order to enjoy it, you have to appreciate sort of the boomer understanding of what New York City is. You know, however, that New York City is not the cultural epicenter of the entire world. It is, again, a staging area for aspiring professional managerial classes, and the opportunities are quickly evaporating from it. And it's also kind of becoming a little bit of a dirty city, although not as dirty as it was in 2021. But, I repeat myself. But in order to enjoy your trip to New York, you have to live in the boomer version of New York City. You have to pretend that what you know about New York City isn't true, and what the propaganda around Rockefeller Center tells you, that's like the real reality. And you're just being a big negative Nancy or whatever you want to call it about all these bad things that have happened. And the same thing is true for Christmas. The same thing is true for Christmas. Like, you have to pretend that this Christmas, that all American kids have a thick Christmas. And we are participating in something that is just, it's destined to happen every year. There is a Christmas, and our children will be celebrating it the exact same way we do. And this is just an element of American stability. The kind of thing that you hear in those old, those not, no, not the earlier original carols, but like the new ones, like Feliz Navidad, or the ones that were written by New York Jews back in the 50s. I'm Dreaming of White Christmas was part of a musical, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, it's this element of American normalcy that is just indestructible. And when you walk into that, you have to believe in its indestructibility. But you can't believe in its indestructibility. Like, in the back of your head, right? And the same thing is true for games. It's harder to play games because in the back of your head, like, we walk into a game store, right? And like, I like nerdy games like Blood Bowl and Netrunner, and all these other Euro games. I wrote an article about it a few months ago. And you walk into a game store, and it's like this adult playground. Is this like, what if your identity was defined by these board games you play? And as an adult, you play them like maybe once or twice a year, right? If you play them 4 times a year, you play it a lot. But everything about that situation is like, remember when there was a period in American history where there was so little to care about that men could define themselves by the consumer products they bought, and they could get super invested in those properties. I don't want to make fun of me. Like, I'm one of these kind of people who's into nerd culture, but when I was in my 20s, there were men who were 40 who were like serious believers in these intellectual properties. Like, and I'm not talking, they weren't losers. They were good programmers, they were scientists, but their main passion in life outside of their career were these consumer products like Star Wars and Star Trek and all this stuff. And and of course, I kind of turned away from that in my late 20s and early 30s, because partially because it was getting more hollow, but and partially because I wanted something more. But always and everywhere, when you encounter these things, it feels like you have to separate yourself into two halves. The half that kind of stares objectively at the bleakness of the world, and the half that can enjoy Christmas, or the half that can enjoy more innocent things. um I was recently a millennial last night, and it's like all live streams, you forget what you say immediately after you said it. um but before that, when I was traveling, I, I I came across a few stories and looked at a few podcasts, and all of these things seem to be entirely different things, but eventually they kind of came to a head in a common theme. So, of course, for let's do the more trivial thing here. Uh, you got a whole, you're traveling, you're not listening to podcasts, and you're kind of going back and you're seeing what people are talking about. And the first one I kind of came across was everyone's still talking about Nick Fuentes. I'm kind of over it, really. I mean, that happened a long time ago with the Piers Morgan thing. I think I covered it on the last Fiddler's Green podcast. It's kind of, it's also sort of not in the spirit of Christmas. It's kind of contentious. But now, I don't know if I want to call PF Young my friend, but I like the guy. I've been on his channel twice now. I appreciate him for where he is in his journey, to borrow a kind of shit-libby way of talking about it ideologically. And he scored an interview with Destiny. And they're talking about Nick Fuentes. And I'm like, wow, I bet PF Young could like really draw some interesting questions out of Destiny. I click on it, and Destiny says one word, and immediately it's like some pre-canned shit about Trump. And I take a step back and I just pause it and click off, and I don't listen to it again. I mean, what could Destiny say that would be at all interesting? it's kind of useless. It's this useless call. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, Nick Fuentes is interesting. Nick Fuentes is pushing the envelope, and there's one thing that one of my main complaints about Nick Fuentes that he shares with Destiny is that both of them are supremely irony poisoned. And I don't know. I don't want to judge Nick Fuentes' character, but I certainly will judge Destiny or Stephen Bonnell's character. I feel like he's an established enough quantity at this stage. The thing with Nick Fuentes is that he has made himself into a person that actually stands for something that is consistent, whereas Destiny has just made himself into a kind of way of using language, a kind of way of positioning himself, of kind of memeing. There's a Destiny way of speaking, there's a Destiny way of memeing. But what quantity does he represent? I certainly understand how many men tried to copy Destiny, but all of that is to say, like, who cares? The second podcast I came across that I did listen all the way through, even though I didn't really intend to, was a podcast by Arch Warhammer, I don't even know his name, and our good friend Carl Benjamin. And they were watching a retrospective on Ian Danskin, the famous bread tuber behind Innuendo Studios. Now, I thought that I wouldn't get like more than 15 minutes into this podcast. And indeed, I was wrong again. It was really interesting. It was really interesting. And I didn't think I get... So I will make no surprise, but I do deeply respect Arch Warhammer. I just don't like the way he talks, and I don't find him very interesting. I think I favorited one video where he talks about Blood Bowl because I play that game. But other than that, he has kind of this meandering way of thinking and speaking. It's just too slow for me. It's not forthright enough. And I'm a big fan of Carl's material. I like how he kind of lays it out very directly and succinctly. He's a much tighter thinker than I could ever be. I'm much too meandering, which is probably why you're watching this, because you're doing something else and you want me to meander. And I don't know. The problem is that when you mix somebody who is doesn't get to the point fast enough with somebody whose main strength is the fact that he just kind of cuts through the bullshit, and you put them on a podcast together, usually you're going to get the combination is going to end up being more of the clear side, right? That's going to dominate. Carl's natural strengths will be obscured by Arch Warhammer's never get to the point of anything style. And, so I haven't been like a fan of the combination, even though I respect the men, so to speak. But this one was super interesting. The one where they review Ian Danskin on BreadTube, because they are reviewing a video takedown by this other new YouTuber. I think his name is Liquid Sonic. And I have been aware of him because I saw a takedown he made about Thought Slime. I hadn't seen the Innuendo Studios one until they reviewed it, but for me, it kind of reminded me of football players like Madden or whatever when they retire from being football players and they come back as commentators, and so now you have Arch Warhammer and Sargon of Akkad. They're in the sky boxes with the earpieces in, and they're commenting on the young blood who's now coming back to making anti-SJW videos. Pretty much 10 years after the height of this thing we know called BreadTube. Now, I mean, I have a lot to say about this. There's a lot of moving parts in this that are interesting. And it concerns the fate of BreadTube, which I think has been very, very interesting in and of itself. So, Ian Danskin was, if you go back to the early episodes of the Fiddler Green podcast, when it was just, I think I used to call them sunset streams or AMAs or whatever. I would just put the video thing on and do a review. This is back when I made video essays and not actual physical essays, when the video essay was the thing. Nowadays, I just do physical essays. And if you want to hear the audio, you can just have the AI read it. And sometimes I read it myself if I think people would really benefit from that. But the thing is that I one of my early things I did on these live streams was review these videos that came out by Ian Danskin of Innuendo Studios, because he was one of the biggest bread tubers or leftist tubers of the 2017 to 2021 era. And then, like all things left wing after 2022, they all just sort of disintegrate in upon themselves. And Ian Danskin was kind of the worst of the, I mean, he was one of the ones that was sort of the most indicative of what it meant to be a leftist millennial of my age. He's almost exactly my age, I believe. He's almost exactly my age. We started doing YouTube at roughly the same time. Again, very similar to ContraPoints in this way. ContraPoints is also almost exactly my age. We're all older millennials that started doing YouTube around this period of time in 2015, 2016, and ended up on different sides of the culture war. Now, obviously, anyone who did this from a leftist point of view was very, very successful. All of the people who are hard right-wingers got deplatformed or canceled or had their lives destroyed. The moderates fared a little bit better. The people who were able to segue into sort of a more conservative sphere, like Tim Pool. And then there's people who kind of did a combination of, they kind of moved to the hard right or the real right, and also combined that with a more mainstream appeal, like our friend Carl Benjamin. And, but if you wanted to make bank, if you wanted to do nothing and make bank, there was obviously no question that the place you needed to be was on the left. That was where the money was made. And I'm not saying this was done cynically. I think most of the people who started doing videos at this time were genuinely true believers. They had come through the same education system that I had, but it was just so strange to see someone of my generation on the other side of being a devout leftist. He was the person that my diversity seminars first year wanted me to be. He deferred to all the progressive orthodoxies. He was a radical while at the same time trusting the experts because he was a conspiracy theorist. And all his videos were kind of psychological takedowns of the right wing. His big video series was the alt-right playbook. And the other thing that was really clear, his videos were boring as hell because they were all arguments with hypothetical people. And the hypothetical people would just, it was like watching Ian Danskin take down the alt-right in 2017 would be like thinking that the right-wingers from One Bad Laugh or Another, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, that's a representation of the actual right wing in 2025. It's that silly. So he's basically having the shadow boxing match with these phantoms that are in his head. And of course, like, he always defeats them. Say, for the sake of argument, you're talking to a Trump supporter, and he says, I think white supremacy is cool. Let's unpack that. And like, he has some kind of like really good takedown of white supremacy, like some really good takedown of some idiotic straw man position that no real person with a reasonably high IQ would ever believe in to begin with. And so, this was the formula. But that wasn't what fascinated me about Ian Danskin. What fascinated me about Ian Danskin was how he defined himself as a person. Because from the get-go, there was videos of him talking about how he was in an open relationship, like proudly so. He was one of the people who's pioneering this idea of being poly or in open relationships or having what they call ethical non-monogamy or any number one of these things, right? The other thing that was really clear about Ian Danskin is that he was just in some weird state of perpetual he was in some weird state of perpetual arrested development. He talked, charitably, he talked like an undergrad in, this kind of affected, cloying, effeminate way. I know I have a lisp too, but I really hope I don't talk in that kind of cloying pattern that I associate with undergrad white men from 2003 or whatever. This was how he talked. This is how he held himself, and his 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 interests, and he did a number of videos about his own interests. He completely defined himself by consumer products, by things like Smash Brothers and video games and like these hug box simulators. And this entire world was built around these identities and these consumer identities. And his interface with politics was through these mediums. Fast forward, what is it now? 6 years since the heyday of Innuendo Studios, maybe 4. He was going strong through COVID, so maybe more like 4 years after the heyday of Innuendo Studios. And his channel, his Patreon is strong. It's paying out $6,000 a month. $6,000 a month. And he's got ad revenue from a channel that's being promoted by the algorithm and still monetized, which is a highly lucrative thing for a YouTuber. I have turned off my monetization. I only make money, and I intentionally only make money doing these podcasts through money that's directly given to me either in Entropy or on my Substack, if you care to subscribe. I know that's not everyone can do that, but that was a choice by me. But, I probably would have considered it differently if I hadn't lived through the great cancellation. But either way, this guy is making bank off of his videos. And like ContraPoints, he never makes videos. He makes one video a year. And the videos he does make, he has people who are helping him through this. The last person, he didn't even voice his own videos. Another YouTuber called PhilosophyTube voiced his own videos. And he shows up on camera in, what is it, May of 2025. Guys, being a YouTuber bankrupted me. I have no free time. I can't pay my taxes. I can't support myself. And I can't even decide, and I need a GoFundMe. And of course he cries and gets this huge GoFundMe created. And this is what the takedown video is about that Sargon and Arch Warhammer are reviewing. He gets $150,000. And then what does he do? The first thing after he gets his money, before he pays his taxes, he just takes the money and goes to Japan. Before he pays his taxes, before he gets out of the hole he's dug himself in. And you're thinking, how does a man who makes $6,000 a month on Patreon plus ad revenue, which would put him really head and shoulders above everyone else that is in the sphere with him, well, anyone else who's financing him, how is he losing all this money? I feel like you should call Caleb Hammer or something like that. Well, people are speculating what he could be doing with it. It's probably going down the tube of like OnlyFans or some pro dom or something like that. This is a man who's you're saying, and you look at Ian Danskin at the beginning of his YouTube journey, and he's this chipper guy that looks like he's fresh out of college. I don't think he actually graduated from college. He's proudly proclaiming about non-monogamy. And right now, when he's cashing in his $150,000 of free internet money to go to Japan, he's just haggard and destroyed, and nothing has really happened to him. I guess, his partner left him. The predictable consequence of having an open relationship is having your main partner not respect you if you're a man, and having her leave because women want men that lay down boundaries, which is critical for the strength of a relationship. But of course, you're a bread tube, so you are a leftist. You're trying to flaunt those boundaries. And oh well, how is a guy? And he's broke. He's alone, even though he had an open relationship, and now he's broke, even though he got an enormous amount of money. What's the story? And Sargon, look, the people who are, I think Arch Warhammer was mostly focused on just the monetary dimension of it, because the sheer amount of money that was coming in from these people was crazy. It was the sheer amount of money that was coming into BreadTube was kind of beyond what you would ordinarily be able to get. And Arch Warhammer is just looking at these numbers and wondering, what OnlyFans thought is just collecting these six-figure paychecks a year from this guy. That he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have a kid, he's not buying a house, he's not paying property taxes, he's not even paying income taxes. And that's where Arch Warhammer is kind of focused on the monetary aspect of it, which is, that's hard not to look away from that story of Ian Danskin. But Carl kind of cuts through the bullshit, and, as he's wont to do. And he said, this is the kind of the natural end of BreadTube. And you see it across everyone's experience with these people. They said that he said hasn't have anything to do with their claims about socialism. As a matter of fact, many of us, if you took our economic ideas from 2017 and compared them to our economic ideas right now, in many ways, we are more socialist. We are more open to sort of a state intervention in the economy than we were before. That was something that, that changed in our position. And he said, well, that's almost the least interesting thing about our conflict. Carl says this. I am paraphrasing very heavily here. He sometimes watches this show, so I'll try not to get it wrong. I'm adding my own flavor into it. And Carl says, well, that our real struggle wasn't about economics. That was not the battle of Gamergate. That was not the battle. It didn't even have to do with ideology. It had to do with a simple proposition. When we first engaged in Gamergate and against Anita Sarkeesian, we had all sorts of crazy ideas. A lot of us were liberals, and now we're not liberals. A lot of us were atheists, and now we're not atheists. I was a liberal when this thing started. It's kind of a conservative liberal, right? Now I'm essentially a monarchist, but whatever, right? All of our ideas changed, but there was one central lodestone that differentiated us always from the left. Again, this is what Carl said. And he said, the left believed that the right politics could be a substitute for ethics and the pursuit of the good life in the Aristotelian sense. And everyone else on the opposite side, whether they were libertarian or liberal or socialists or reactionaries or nationalists, they all said no. No, the pursuit of the good human life is the first thing. That is the most important thing. That pursuit of the good life is what all politics comes from. And now we're sitting here 5 years later, and BreadTube's kind of collapsed in on itself, not for any political reason, but because their own personal understanding of the universe has kind of collapsed in on itself. Their lives have collapsed into themselves. Destiny, great example, kind of an uninteresting person because he's a non-person. He's a non-person, and you could say, oh, well, it's because of the famous patented Destiny debate style. That is his his idea is to be a person that is constantly shifting the frame. He's not really a set of political ideas. Any number of opinions come out of Destiny's mouth on any given day, but what he is really a frame game. And there's a lot to complain about the frame game. You will never nail me down on a positive position. I'm going to just critique you from the view from nowhere endlessly. That's a problem in of itself. But the bigger problem, the ultimate end of Destiny, the point where I think even the people who liked his political positions realized he was a fraud, was his own personal problems, his inability to keep his relationship going. And it sounds really, really petty, but it was indicative of everything else. It was indicative of everything else. Destiny thought that he could take a human problem and quote numbers at it. He could say, oh, well, polyamory works because you don't have five-sided sources, showing that it doesn't. But you cannot quote numbers to the spirit of life. You cannot recite a bibliography against the imminent reality that you experience. This does not answer the question of what the good life is. What is in Danskin's audience looking for? What is Destiny's audience looking for? It's obvious to see how the algorithm popularizes them. Now, this kind of segues, and I was thinking about this, the death of BreadTube. All of these BreadTubers have just ruined their own lives because they can't manage their own lives, because they're not pursuing the good life. And I never liked these guys, these BreadTubers. Obviously, I've always been a fan of Carl, and kind of apathetic towards Arch Warhammer when he's not talking about a game that I play, which is very, very few at this stage. And I come across two people that I do kind of like on a podcast in Substack, and this is it is Walt Bismarck and a Substacker called Ancient Problems. And I just heard this one today, and they're talking about various different things having to do with the gender war and all this stuff. But, both these people, and I do respect these men, I like their content a lot. But they come from this sphere on Substack that are kind of like the old rationalist spheres, the old spheres of the less wrong people, the people who are trying to look at things objectively and dispassionately, the people like Bentham's Bulldog and stuff like that. And I don't want to, these people have very diverse points of view, but I don't want to, I don't want to confuse you and say that, Walt Bismarck or Ancient Problems has the same point of view as Bentham's Bulldog. But the one common thread that I see in all these people and how they talk about religion and morality is they talk about religion and morality like it's all a big hustle. Like it's all a big hustle. Like I was going for my bar mitzvah and I heard the chief rabbi curse under his breath, and I realized that no one really believes this. Or, the Walt Bismarck line, all ethics are transactional. All ethics are transactional. And, it struck me that this, and it's not like I don't agree with it. Like, obviously, I'm a moral realist. Of course, I disagree with that perspective. I think it's untrue. But I think I really believe that people who are in this sphere in Substack, they're heading it down a dead end in thinking. Their complaint about religion and morality is that it is affected. And the reason why it is affected is that we don't believe it at all times. And that is in a sense true. It is in a sense true in the same way that when I'm playing Blood Bowl, or I'm shopping with my kid, or we're celebrating Christmas dinner, I am not, like, I don't believe that we are in this dark position civilizationally because I can't. Like, I literally can't simultaneously vivify the darkness of our situation in my mind at the same time while I enjoy holiday trivialities. I occupy this moment of kind of false consciousness in this space. And the same thing is true for belief in God. And this is actually a very modern condition. This would not be true of people who lived before the 19th century. But this is true for almost all believers now, and that is that I do not believe my belief is false, but it's kind of like my darker political beliefs. Every time I'm doing something where I'm not thinking about the religion itself, like my belief is not organically there, right? I don't process the fact that I believe these radical things about the universe. I don't When I'm shopping in the supermarket, I'm not processing the fact that like I'm in the imminent presence of God, that Christ is coming, that there's this moral commandment on me not to slack off. And I mean that's you'd have to I mean I don't feel an intense sense of guilt when I engage in acts of like self-indulgence, like playing a video game when I really should be, helping with my chores around the house or something like that, right? Like I did that a lot when I was sick, right? And I wasn't sick enough not to help, right? In that moment, I was functionally an atheist because to do otherwise would be ridiculous. Now, to people like apparently Walt Bismarck and Ancient Problems, this is like an indication that this is like a fake way of being. And both of them, all these people in this circle kind of promote this weird kind of functional nihilism where they're not nihilists, but they never really lock down on their principles because they've convinced themselves that solid principles aren't consistently observed by the religious. And I mean, okay, like they could say that they're nihilists. Like, let's do the whole crime and punishment thing, right? And this is what I did too, right? You're like, oh, I don't believe in this. Is my undergraduate period. Look, I don't believe in anything. There are no morals, right? And you can say that, right? You can say that you don't believe in morals and it's all just might makes right. And you're not going to encounter some piece of evidence in the universe that's going to contradict that statement of nihilistic purity. But the problem is if you sit with this belief long enough, this is sort of one of the main insights of Dostoevsky. You'll realize that the nihilism itself is also an affectation. You're not a pure nihilist. At many moments, you want the universe to be moral. And in fact, not only do you want it to be moral, you believe that it is a moral universe that you inhabit with senses of justice. And not only that, you do not act as a completely self-interested individual. The idea that you will never sacrifice your own interests for anyone else's, that there are no pure elements of sacrifice. It's not even true to your own instincts as a person. Your personhood wills there to be an external sense of meaning. And I mean, if you don't believe it when you're 32, like Walt Bismarck, you'll certainly believe it after you have children. That there is an external sense of value that you will sacrifice for that is outside of yourself that you cannot viscerally escape. And it's not like affectation. It's not like, oh, I want there to be morality. Therefore, I'm going to pretend like I have this self-sacrificial instinct when I really don't. And, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening with nihilists. What nihilists are actually doing is they're saying, sometimes I'm a functional nihilist and sometimes I'm a functional moralist. And so I'm going to say that I'm a nihilist all the time because in this situation, it's easier for me to be an unknown quantity. If I just declare myself to be an inconsistent nihilist, then no one can ever hold me to account for anything that I believe in. They can never call me a hypocrite. I'm completely unbound. And sure, I'm not going to make Raskolnikov's mistake and say that I am a pure nihilist and I'm not bound by any morality. I'm inconsistent, but I'm going to be a public nihilist because that allows me to exist in modernity in a more easier sense. I can be moralistic on my own time as my own consciousness dictates. But as far as anyone else is concerned, I am just transactionally dealing with morality as it serves my own interests and as I negotiate it with the rest of the social circumstance. Okay, well, what do all three of these podcasts have in common? Well, they seemed, and this is what you're here for, me trying to draw threads together. They seemed to interface with this these other three events that happened over the course of the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. The first one was the Bondi beat. This is not in order of how they happened, and I don't even actually remember the order in which they happened because they were all discovered in the course of the same 5 days. The first, the big one that seized the headlines was the Bondi Beach shooting. It was this big Islamic terrorist campaign in Australia. And it was basically an attack on Muslims against the Jewish community of Australia. And I remember just kind of seeing it and going, ordinarily, this would be a big deal. Ordinarily, this would be something that we would have to take stock of. And I remember just viewing this shooting in kind of like this profound sense of detachment. You know, I'm not Jewish or Muslim, and they're having like this proxy war over a war that's going on in the Middle East that also does not involve me other than how it impacts the Christian community there in any meaningful way. And the only thing that I am concerned about is why is this happening inside Christian countries? Like, why are we having proxy battles here? But the problem is that everyone else online, they either want you to spin up on team pro Zionism, anti-terrorism, the old jihad watch people who were out in force. And then, there were the other side, there was sort of the defensive side that wanted to support the global intifada and wanted to reframe the entire shooting as a problem with gun control, which of course is completely ridiculous because up until this point, Australia's gun laws were the most restrictive in the entire world, bar none from my understanding. And, once you have a terrorist cell that's planning out an ambush, good luck stopping firearms from getting to them on a long enough time frame. Once people are operating like a functional paramilitary, then you've got a huge problem on your hands. But again, somehow it's not my problem because both of the sides arguing, whether it was the liberal Zionists or the global intifada people, they're kind of two sides of the progressivism, two sides of the progressive coalition. Both of them were the direct authors of the immigration policy that brought those people to Australia to begin with and ensured that there would almost certainly be repeat incidences. I don't know what to say. I don't know what I should be saying. I felt like I should say something. I felt like I should have some emotion about this, and I didn't. And that was a little unsettling. But 2 days before that, something happened that was also interesting. The Brown University had a shooting. And this is sort of the opposite effect. I was obsessed with this shooting for some reason. It took place on a university campus, an Ivy League university, no less, one of the better schools on the East Coast. The killer or whatever had apparently scoped out the building ahead of time and avoided the security cameras, came up unloaded with a weapon, and then killed apparently one woman who is a college conservative activist and another, I think, another transfer student from India or whatever, who I guess was just studying in the same building with her. And then he just disappears. And then 3 days later, he assassinates a professor at MIT. Or at least according to the authorities, this was the same killer. And it turns out, and it was bizarre because it did not follow the same pattern of your typical school shooter. Just cause as much mayhem as possible until you are taken out or you commit suicide. This guy struck two very specific targets, very far apart, completely evaded authorities before eventually he killed himself. And it was impossible not to imagine that this was some broader political statement in this. And I guess this is why you look out in the modern world and kind of see a blank abyss of nihilism, assuming that we can believe the story as presented by the authorities. The shooter at Brown University turned out to be a physics student from Portugal who was essentially passed over the course of his career and locked out of professional advancement. And he was apparently had connections to Brown University. I don't know why he targeted that particular building. That is sort of a mystery. But this was what he was bitter about being passed over, so he assassinated, kind of Breaking Bad style. He assassinated the person who got picked over him, and then then right after shooting up the college classroom that he remembers working in. Uh, the thing with the school shooters is because of their incredible depravity and because of their incredible uh, brutality and just ferociousness, like Columbine. It's almost like watching people getting gored by an animal. The bullets are flying everywhere. These killers sometimes have manifestos, but they make no sense. And they almost always die immediately afterwards, which makes it seem like a suicide bomb. Now that the fashion these days is essentially to be an assassin, to be someone who moves into an area, kills, and then leaves, the motivation, you immediately think of the person as somebody whose motivations you try to capture. Because I think everyone has, at some point, for me, it's impossible to imagine I would ever shoot up a school. That seems absolutely insane. But, and I hope this isn't going to get my channel shut down. Maybe I should. That's going to get me in trouble. Who among us has not watched a movie like Day of the Jackal and not imagined assassinating a particularly bad political figure? I mean, who am I kidding? Like, the fantasy of every liberal is to go back in time and assassinate Adolf Hitler. And so when you see someone like Luigi Mangione, or even the guy who killed Charlie Kirk, the motivations kind of become more clear. They become something that you can countenance. And I guess that's what kind of this Brown shooting thing did. In a sense, he had very typical motivations of your classic school shooter. He pulled it off in a way that made it look like a political assassination. Political assassinations are targeted and are designed for the assassin to potentially escape, because the message is supposed to focus on the person being assassinated and not the individual creating a carnage. It's supposed to be incisive. However, modern day assassins, Day of the Jackal type assassinations, that is what you typically see. And in these modern day assassins, and especially in this Brown shooting, it was kind of like a combination of the two of them. He was partially an assassin and partially a school shooter. And the Brown assassin had very similar motives to other school shooters, like I already said. And it always struck me as something that was deeply alien to Christian civilizations. Apparently, this kind of motivation is very, very common in Asian civilizations, especially ones that are diasporic. So in the Philippines, I am told, and in Malaysia, where there are Chinese colonies, these kind of like killings of frustrated young men are actually fairly common. And so what this young man is he was frustrated at his life. He hated his life because somebody had succeeded and he felt like he was locked out. And of course, we're reading all about this the same weekend that apparently the Jacob Savage article drops, and pretty much every millennial and Zoomer realizes that, hey, we were all locked out. We were all denied opportunities that otherwise would have fallen into our laps. We all, in some sense, were fucked over. So this school shooter can kind of join, post your grievances at the end of the line here because everyone has them. We're all millennials. We all kind of, I mean, no, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not bad to be a millennial. Imagine what it would be like living through the Black Death. But at least for the previous two generations, millennials kind of look like they've drawn the short straw in the West, at least if you're a straight white man. And so, the motivations are incredibly uh, understandable, but the actions are just so alien. It feels like a betrayal of everything. And I mean everything the West stands for. To be disappointed about your life not achieving anything, and then to kill the people who achieved more or who got the opportunity. Uh, I'm not saying this didn't happen in the past, but there's something that's deeply unchristian. And look, I mean, all suicide is unchristian, all murder is unchristian. But saying that son of a bitch is an evil murderer, I'm going to wait in this clock tower and, and assassinate him, for withdrawing from Algeria or whatever the motivation is, for being the leader of the National Socialist Party. That is a motivation that is in some sense unethical as a Christian. It is violating the rules of war, but it is something that is still within the spirit that a Christian warrior might think. Being disappointed with your life and then killing yourself and other individuals. It's soliphistic. It denies what it communicates to me more than anything else. You want this thing called greatness, right? You wanted this thing called greatness. I mean, it's very much the Breaking Bad problem too. You want this thing called greatness, and greatness passed you by, and it will never come again. And look, we're all in these positions. In some sense, a lot of opportunities are evaporating up as we speak, and we are kind of in the waning days of social media, at least as we have known it in the past. But greatness has passed you by, and you'll never have greatness again. But why did you want greatness? Certainly, you wanted greatness for the sake of the good that it embodied, and you're very upset that it wasn't given to you. But then why would you then destroy that good? It's the incredible nihilism. It's like the greatness was only greatness if it was possessed by me. And if it's possessed by somebody else, it is anti-greatness. And furthermore, I'd much rather have the notoriety of being a villain. This is the motivation of almost all school shooters. I'd much rather be infamous for being a villain than just to have my life be over and to die in anonymity. The reason why I think it's so unchristian is it postulates from the onset that the self is the definition, the magnitude of the self in one way or the other is the greatest arbiter of goodness. The goodness is not something that exists outside of ourselves, but is an attribute that it's attached to the individual being as perceived by others. So the only thing that matters is to have a lot of people who consider you fearsome or fearful or great or big. It's not to actually find some goodness or truth that exists outside. It's inverted. And something about it, it's fundamentally a product of how we see the world post World War II. It's a very boomer way of viewing the world. What matters is that I am the biggest man in the room. What matters, and I don't care if that's the biggest man in an evil direction or a good direction. I don't care if people hate me or love me after I die. As long as they know that I'm a big man, as long as I make my mark, as long as I have this explosion. But certainly wouldn't the, I mean, again, I'm speaking for myself. Certainly we're all going to be forgotten. Certainly we're all going to die in anonymity at some point. And why do we even want? I mean, it takes a lot of pain to kill yourself. It takes a lot of pain to kill others, presuming you're not a sadist. Why would you go, even if you were a nihilist, why would you go to all that trouble to turn yourself into a demon for 72 hours and then not even to revel in it, which is what's so strange, right? I mean, I don't know if I were an assassin, wouldn't I kind of want to give the authorities a little more of a run for their money? I mean, it wasn't like they were honing in on catching him to begin with. He shot some people in Brown and then had 5 days to assassinate another university professor at another, I don't know if it's an Ivy League college, MIT, but another elite Eastern Seaboard college. That's, I don't know. I mean, but the point is, to take the moment of time when you are the most magnified in the eyes of other people, either for good or ill, and then just to terminate yourself in that moment, because all that matters is the power that you've been able to grab in the perception of others. I mean, it sounds weird, but it's the boomer ideology. Last event of these things. Rob Reiner and his wife killed by his son. It's strange, and I don't know how to really react to this. I was always kind of the world's biggest anti-Rob Reiner fan, to be honest. I mean, look, if there was some kind of platonic form of the boomer, Rob Reiner would be it. He was the first thing he was known for in most people's estimation was the ultra boomer show All in the Family, which was just like this generation defining movie in which he, like the son-in-law, is stuck in the same house with an elderly in-law parent, Archie Bunker, which is, another famous. And I wrote an article about that a year ago. And Archie Bunker is the indication of everything the baby boomers wanted to leave behind: racism, tradition, stodginess, bourgeoisie values. We're all getting rid of that. And Meathead, I don't even remember what the character's name was. All I know is that the Archie Bunker called him Meathead, right? And he's married to Archie Bunker's daughter, Gloria, and they're kind of doing the multi-generational housing, shall we say, the original version of multi-generational housing. And it's very much a product of its time. It's very much a product of the 70s. Meathead is supposed to represent the baby boomers after the late 60s, transform them ideologically. He's got one foot in the radical past, and he's got another foot in sort of a professional life, like the professional life that all boomers found their way to. I even think there's like an affirmative action episode once, and it's kind of funny to see it play out. But Rob Reiner also went on to do things like This Is Spinal Tap, which is again like a quintessentially boomer movie. It's a look back on the culture of the late 70s and early 80s rock and roll, and kind of like turning it a bit into a tribute, a bit of a lampoon, and kind of being above it all. What is the other one he's known for? Princess Bride, right? I mean, a lot of great movies, but each one of these cultural artifacts kind of cemented Rob Reiner as as like this figure of what it meant to be a boomer. And he's killed by his son, and his son was suffering from drug abuse problems and mental illnesses and mental illness. And I don't know. I don't want, and his son was an adult, right? And I don't want to cast aspersions on Rob Reiner's parenting, but this person was someone who should have been committed. This person who killed Rob Reiner was somebody who should have been committed and placed in an institution, and none of that was undertaken. It was all kind of swept under the rug to a certain extent. It was kind of pushed back and pushed down. And I can't help but kind of associate that with a lot of boomers' relationship with the next generation that they manage. So the boomers are successful. They have children who have serious problems. But they don't engage with those problems because those problems would break up the flow of their own lives. So those problems metastasize and metastasize. And maybe it's not something as serious as Rob Reiner's problem with his son. But either way, it is sort of indicative of everything the boomers do. There's this great article by Kevin Dolan in the Exit newsletter, and someone who's I've very much admired, and I've taken a lot of my thought from him. And people are talking about this speech by Vivek Ramaswamy about what it means to be an American. And Vivek, he had this article in the New York Times this week about what it means to be an American. And he said, there are only 5 things that make you a good American. You believe in liberty, you follow the law, you believe in the Constitution, and you think that anyone can be an American or something like that, right? You have like these civic virtues, you follow the law, you're an individualist, and you love freedom. And just like by that definition, by those, I don't know, by those 5 standards Vivek laid out, anybody in the entire world who just said the right platitudes about liberty and passed a U.S. civics exam would be more American than you were. It's an absolute, like, you think for 5 seconds about this, and Kevin Dolan is right. Vivek Ramaswamy lays out these 5. Maybe I can find this article. I feel like a glare here. Vivek, what it means to be American. 5 things. I'll read them out here. Okay, here's his 5 things. Belief in meritocracy. Oh, wow. Everyone is a meritocrat. Duh. This is another one of those boomer things here. Belief in meritocracy. I mean, meritocracy, everyone likes merit by definition of the word merit. It's who defines merit that is the real question. Believing in the rule of law. Well, gee, any law-abiding citizen believes in the rule of law. It is not an uncommon thing. Outside of like very uncivilized areas of modern states, people believe in the law. You're unapologetic about free speech. Sure. I guess that's done to distinguish Americans from Europeans, maybe, but I don't feel like there's much free speech in this country. Individual responsibility and courage, which is just, again, a boomer platitude. I mean, the responsibility we take, again, who doesn't believe in responsibility, and the dedication to the 1776 ideas. So just basically the constitutional principles, which, again, this is just what you get asked on a civics exam. This is procedural. This is something you can cram for in one afternoon. If you put those 5 reasons to any other person in the world who had a reasonably high IQ, they would pass them with enough time to study. They're self-referential. And the idea that this is what it means to be an American in a historical sense is utter hogwash. Nobody should be buying this story. Yet, Vivek's been singing this song for a year now, at least. There was another article he wrote last year with the same tune. He's been singing this song for the better part of a year. And people keep on paying for it. And the reason why, as Kevin Dolan points out, is that there is a whole cohort of our country that's looking to sell what Vivek Ramaswamy wants to buy. They want to sell America as an individual product and not as a collective product, because by selling it, the boomers will prove in some way or another that there is no collective called America, that there is no collective responsibility of the past to the future, that the only thing that it really means is to kind of be a big person. And that's the meaning of life, to be a big individual. To be a big individual is the meaning of life. If you're a big individual, you've done well in life. You have no responsibility to a broader collective. You have nothing to pass down to your children. It's just be a big individual. Well, Rob Reiner's didn't have a chance to be a big individual, and he turned to drugs. The Brown shooter didn't have a chance to be a big individual, so he communicated his dispossession and disappointment by assassinating people. But that's the whole point, to be a big individual. And if you agree with Vivek Ramaswamy on these individualistic understandings of what it means to be an American, then you can shore that up, because the alternative is to actually come face to face with the idea that there is a collective patrimony that we are handing down throughout the generations, and that we have a responsibility for that. And if people admit that is what it means to be an American, that it is a dedication to ancestors and to posterity, they will immediately look at the legacy that they have created in this moment and realize that they have failed. The sale is essential. The boomers are looking to sell because they cannot hold it anymore as individuals, and they can't pass it down as a collective because the thing is unworthy to be passed down as a collective. The process of passing it down, collectively speaking, is a scary proposition for them. It doesn't tell a good story. I think the greatest Christmas story I usually like telling, and I talk about it almost every year, is It's a Wonderful Life. Oftentimes, we always have a debate about what it means, but it is, in a sense, the closest in kind of spiritual understanding to a core struggle that many adults have to go through. I'm not really spoiling anything. This movie is a classic and has been played over and over again for almost 90 years. Well, I guess more 80 years. 80 years, probably. It came out right at the end of World War II. And it's about a man who's very talented called George Bailey, who just gets shortchanged through his entire life. He has to sacrifice for his family's business, for the people of Bedford Falls, his hometown. And in the end, at least until the end of the movie, it looks like he's getting even more screwed over, and he's going to lose it all now, and he's going to go to jail. And this is kind of he's contemplating suicide in this moment. And what is shown to him through divine vision is this idea, and I think it's the idea that we've lost as a society, that life is not about just you as a big individual. Life is about you being a piece of the great chain. And even the smallest piece of the great chain contributes. So again, I'm not spoiling A Wonderful Life for you, right? The angel shows George Bailey what life would be like if he had not existed in it. And of course, everything is much worse. And he realizes that in heaven's eyes, he is great. He is meaningful. Even if no one else realizes it in his entire life. Even if no one else realizes it in his entire life, he has a wonderful life. That's the title of the title of the movie. Um, I like it so much because I feel like that message. This is Frank Capra's message, was that the world is held up by tiny acts of charity. Everything about modern media celebrates the big individual being seen by others on the screen. I guess I'm kind of doing that to you now, right? But that's not what makes up the fabric of our reality. What makes up the fabric of our reality is our relationship with others, and not parasocial relationship with others, because what makes up the real substance of our beings is what we give to others. I say fake politics is what you say, real politics is what you cannot leave behind, or what you make sacrifices for. That's why Destiny is an uninteresting person, because I don't know what he can't leave behind. What would he sacrifice for? I know what he says, but I don't believe that there's any understanding of sacrifice. Everything is completely solipsistic in its understanding of the good. What does it mean to have this kind of functional, transactional understanding of morality? I mean, look, it's an optimal thing. If you're an influencer, the best thing you can do is to treat morality and politics as purely transactional. Take a different position every day, and it's great. It's great television because even your own audience, and this is one reason why we irony poisoned ourselves. Even your own audience doesn't really know what your positions are. One day it seems like you're leaning towards the right. The other time it seems like you're leaning towards the left. And like, I really respect people like P.F. Young. I think he's a great creator, a great video essayist, but he runs the risk of this. At some sense, I feel moralism is necessary, not necessarily for a confession about what I believe, because like all other people, I struggle with these multiple consciousnesses throughout my existence of not really being a believer when I'm not looking right at it. I declare myself as having moral principles because I believe it's essential for my relationship with my viewers, with everyone out in the rest of the world, for me to talk about what are the things that I can't leave behind, what are my commitments, what are the things that I would sacrifice for. Because and if you can't know me as a known quantity, if I can't be constant, then I'm if I'm just a completely chaotic entity, and maybe I'm a very entertaining one, maybe I give you all sorts of little sound bites that you can show your friends. Maybe I humiliate people in debates. If I'm a chaotic quantity, then the only way you can appreciate me is to constantly look at me and try to figure out what I'm doing this week. That's not the point of doing any of this. The point of doing this, any of this stuff, is so I can give other people a better understanding of the universe. And I can't do that without an understanding of constancy in my own soul and an idea that there is worth that is pointed outwards. I think this is kind of missing. And this is why I always are. I mean, we are in the process of having social media die on us. I think this is the beginning of the end for social media. I mean, there always will be social media. Social media will be a thing. Podcasts are a very entertaining form of media, and people will continue to listen to them. I hope you guys all continue to listen to this one here. But this age dominated by social media, we're beginning to see sort of the boundaries of its utility. And the boundaries of its utility are that it has a very difficult time forming long relationships and people that have a constant disposition. It is very good at cheering people up and spitting them out, like Ian Danskin and the rest of the BreadTube crew. People in that area of the internet almost kind of expect and want their content creators to destroy their own lives. But I think the point of this all is to kind of invert the direction of the internet. I think there is a flu going around and we're not feeling well. Everyone's kind of trying to take a stock of the year. God knows that I'm behind on my essay writing, my preparation from this stream. But I do think that having a, a bit of quiet time in this period is essential to kind of come to an understanding of who we are. Looking at these events this week, it just, this is the new normal, guys. This is the new normal. Political assassinations are the order of the day. Open ethnic conflict in Western countries are the order of the day. Apathetic boomers that don't care about anything, not even their own children, are the order of our day. The vengeful son that murders the father, that's the order of the day. But we don't want any of this. And nor do we want to be the people who are sitting at the end of it and say, I told you so. We want to discover some kind of existence on the other side of it. And, for this reason, and this is really what brought me to in real life organizing, as much as I've been trying to get into it. The organization is not to create political change in the short term. The organization is to find a way to use our social media presences and to use the conversations that we're having in real life towards a greater end that helps other people and that points to something that's greater than ourselves. That's one reason why, there's a cycle. There's a cycle always between the over-civilized man who has a completely technical identity and then the nomad who has the completely transactional, vitalistic identity. And this is the great Ilban Khaldun struggle between the nomad and the city man, between the soft denizen of the polis and the barbarian. But the person who disrupts the cycle, what leads it not to be just vicious and pointless, the barbarian doesn't win. It is the barbarian redeemed in a religion that wins. It is the new faith in something outside of oneself. I think we're a long way away from a religious revival. That's obviously the only solution to the problems we have right now. The problems we have right now. The problem we have right now is the ruling class is shit. The ruling class can't be replaced at this stage because we do not have an energetic ruling class to replace them with. So the best you can hope for is a Caesar that will just bureaucratically manage this disaster until it collapses, or some kind of weird anarchy, which is the worst possible outcome. Until we can rediscover a sense of religion. And I don't think that religion can really be found on social media. It has to be done in person. It has to be done in spaces of silence and quiet. When you realize that small transactions, small things you do for people hold more significance than loud statements proclaimed. And I think the image of Christmas here is just essential in all of this. The contrast of Caesar with the nativity of Christ. One being a massive bureaucratic movement to consolidate the empire. In many ways, the census that brought Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem was the managerialization of the Roman Empire, which meant also the death of the organic Roman state. After the tax system and the census was installed by Augustus Caesar, the Roman Empire ceased being the imperial destiny of one people with a single religion to conquer the globe and bring it under their domination, and became a tax collecting machine for the next 400 years. Now, there were 400 years with surprisingly little warfare, and many historians have said that you would be very privileged to live through those 400 years, as opposed to the 400 years that preceded them or the 400 years that came immediately after them. And certainly that's true. But it was a very spiritually hollow time to be part of that large system, to the point where people didn't even have children anymore. But there's always these spaces. There are always these eddies and the currents of history where real holiness brews. Again, I don't think I've ever been more cynical about the destiny of social media, because I think the thing is literally broken and everyone can see it right now. But I think that the legacy of what we do here and the ideas we share here, we can find ourselves in one of these small eddies of hope, one of these small positions, one of these beautiful lives that we can live and discover real spirituality. And real spirituality are those moments where you do not have to force yourself to acknowledge the reality of holiness, where holiness is imminent, like the air in the room, and seems to pierce through all of the horrible things that are on the horizon. The fact that it doesn't seem like we have a future. In the holy moments, all of those things are unified, and people become one individual whose actions, even without consequence, carry more significance than for a moment being Caesar, being the man that everyone loves or hates, being the person that wields the knife in the forum, or being the person who stabbed to death, to being the person who found Rome in brick and left it in marble. The small moments are where the revival of life occurs. And I think every Christmas, every holy day, where we let God really act inside of us, we kind of discover that sense of wonder and that ability to kind of transcend this weird dual consciousness that we have to live with in every other ordinary moment of our lives. With that, guys, that is the lecture portion of the podcast. I will now go to the entropy. It's a little bit shorter this time because I am indeed not feeling very well. I also imagine that there's a lot fewer people who are watching. I think there are some problems with the entropy. I have to say, though, it has been a very dark week and one where I've had very, very little energy. So maybe not as sophisticated as my usual talks, but thank you so much for joining me anyway. And I hope that you have a great rest of the Christmas. Let's do the super chats here. Dark Voyager for $10 USA says, Merry Christmas. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Tobarius R for $3 USA says, what is your opinion on Iranian boniads? Dare I Google that? Okay. Let's see what Wikipedia says. There are charitable trusts in Iran that play a major role in Iran's economy. Or are these like Islamic loans or whatever? Okay, so apparently there's some kind of economic institution that is nevertheless owned by the supreme leader of Iran. I wouldn't be surprised if this had something to do with Islamic banking, but I can't delve into this Wikipedia article right now. So, look, guys, the name of the game right now is organization. I am one to speak. I am been so busy traveling that I haven't been able to do very many in real life events in the last month, but that is what everyone understands right now. It is time to tribe up with people who understand that you have a common future together, hopefully both with common ancestors and with common posterity and with common religious ideas, common religious beliefs, or failing that, at least common religious values. And the first and hardest obstacles that we have to overcome are economic. They're economic obstacles. And hopefully people will overcome that, but it is something that every time I see one of these things from the Muslim world, I think, how can we copy that? How can we make that a reality? It will be a little bit hard considering that this appears to be an extension of the government, and there really isn't a way to make that a reality in a world where these financial means are controlled tightly. But I am looking to I am looking to people like Kevin Dolan and others, and the people at the OGC, for our understanding of what it means to develop mutual aid societies. Uh, Progress is consistent. It's it's slow but consistent. I'll say that, right? We're going in the right direction. Things are happening. I always get frustrated that it's not happening fast enough, but you can't speed up organic things. Aspiring misanthrope for $3. It's a trite quip from Uncle Yarvin, but on a new founding podcast, he said, regarding the Obama HRC Soros crowd, you can't anthropomorphize them. They don't want the same thing as you and I. Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's precisely the case. Like Richard Hanania and Matt Iglesias and Noah Smith or Destiny, they're auditioning for a professional role. They don't care really about the outcomes. Like there are some people who believe that there's like a spiritual destiny in things, and they actually strive towards it. Like some people believe that upon discovering the truth behind physics, humanity will become enlightened. And they work towards these truths with a kind of ardor I don't believe in, really, and never was able to summon within myself. When right wingers do politics, we do politics for our children, for the people we care about, for the future of humanity. Matt Iglesias does politics so that he can create a Matt Iglesias brand thing that he can sell to the donor class. And the same thing is true about Ezra Klein. This is something that was very much exposed by the Jacob Savage article, just how cynical these fuckers are. They don't believe anything. They repeat lines that get them into positions. Aspiring misanthrope for $3 USA. Starting out a first Christmas as a married man. Any advice, wisdom, and hard lessons learned? Christmas was a very easy time for me always as a couple. I don't know. Read Gift of the Magi. That would be a really, really fun Christmas story to read with your wife. And then try not to repeat its mistakes. I am a very bad shopper. I always struggle to find a good present for my wife. Kids are easy. Kids are super easy. I mean, it's depressing the fact that the things that we are buying are just copies of the things that we had and not new things, which you get the sense walking through toy stores that you're putting on a rerun of your own childhood and not something that's organically new. This is the sense of everything in America these days. But it's I don't know. Uh, my advice with all women is make sure they get enough sleep. Uh, Never. My advice for all married men is be the project manager of your marriage. You're going to split up chores, and she's going to do some things, and you're going to do other things. But make sure the core management tasks of planning are yours. You plan out the schedule. You plan out the broad finances. I'm not saying you have to balance her checkbook or anything, but you plan them. And then if you plan them, she will be way happier to do that. She will be way happier doing three things and planning nothing than doing one thing and having to plan two things. That's just the nature of women. They really hate uncertainty. And so you have to be the project manager of your relationship. You have to let your wife get sleep. And then, while you're planning, you have to plan something special with your wife. Women like special considerations. And that's my advice for getting through all things women. Aspiring Misanthrope, $3. For your son, get him a sword from Middleborn Arms. Fantastic quality, perfect knight in the making tools. How has rearing and playing with your child changed you? Good night and God bless. My son loves swords. He went as Link for Halloween, and we've tried to stop him from hitting the cat with a sword. We got a new cat for his birthday, and he's liked it, but he's a little bit too rough. He likes chasing it, which is what cat hates. Yeah, and the cat's name is Constantine. So I call the cat Constantine Kitten, and the wife doesn't get the pun, but it's not for her to get. But he chases Constantine Kitten around with a sword. He likes hitting rocks with a sword. He likes having sword fights with his cousins. They're great. I like the plastic ones because they're easy to replace. He had a wooden one, but it was it was a little deadly. You hit things with wooden swords and it really hurts. So I'm kind of still trying to figure out how to integrate that. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, just watching your child kind of become a real person. I mean, they're always real people, but watching their personality develop is really magical. My son has the greatest sense of humor. I guess I could share some stories, right? So he was hearing us talk about debt, and we explained debt as a monster that eats money. And then he asked where this monster lived. And we said, well, it lives at the bank. So when we take him to the bank to do some work today, he busts in and goes, there's a debt monster that lives at this bank and it's eating all of your money. And I'm going to kill this monster. And all of the teller, I mean, it feels like I feel like relating that. I'm relating one of those too good to be true Facebook posts that boomers love that actually literally happened. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And everyone laughed. You're gonna wade into the vaults of the bank and kill the debt monster with your sword. That's great. Yeah, but that's the joys of being a parent, I guess. You know, really relish it if you can as many times as you possibly can. But thank you, aspiring misanthrope. Tobias R says, I want to ask, suppose you were born in 1950s like a boomer. Do you think you would fall from the post-1960s civil rights narrative? Could you imagine yourself falling for that? Also, Merry Christmas. Well, I mean, I do, because my father, who I really respected, was a huge believer in liberalism right up to his death. And he wrote a book about it, and I might try to republish that and then make it into a dialogue. I think that might be interesting. And but he was a believer in the post-war civil rights liberalism, and he was a very old man. When he had me as a child, he was almost 50. But he believed that this liberalism, this liberal world, was the only thing that was standing in the way between mankind and nuclear war. And look, I mean, he was right in a sense, right? Once liberalism dies, so resumes the Hobbesian world order in a certain sense. The world becomes darker. And that he's not wrong about that. That is something that we had to deal with. That we had to deal with the fact that we are leading our children to a darker world than what we had before. But the thing is, we can't will that world into existence. I can't will the world of the 90s to be sustainable. It wasn't sustainable. It's not sustainable. The illusion of the security that it promised was always an illusion. But I think when you get to a certain age, you have to your threads of hope become very, very thin, and you have to kind of get locked in on those threads of hope. And then Vivek Ramaswamy is like this scammer who's trying to tell the boomers this very comforting narrative about the world they live in. So he'll literally give their inheritance over to him. And I don't know. It's something that's natural after a certain age to kind of solidify on your threads of hope that you pursue. But I think at least it's the job of young men or not old men to kind of wake up from it. I mean, look, the lie of the civil rights narrative, it only became really obvious in the last 15 years. When I started this YouTube channel in 2000, we're coming up on almost, I mean, I don't know, depending on how you count when I started my YouTube channel, this is about the 10th year I've been doing this. When I started my YouTube channel, one of the first videos I made was a debate, and I say in it, I am an ardent defender of liberalism. Now, this was not, and I want to emphasize this was not because I was unaware of Curtis Yarvin. I had already read Curtis Yarvin. This was not because I was unaware of the critiques that people like Patrick Deneen would later write about in his book, Why Liberalism Failed. The reason why I was a liberal in 2015 was I felt like there was still time to to right the ship, to get us back on track, and to restore the 90s. I wasn't aware of the size of the transition. I wasn't aware of the extent to which the institutions had essentially been dominated by an illiberal left, and the extent to which the demographic change would be so fast in the rest of the West. And there was essentially zero time to turn this around, and that to a large degree, the boomers that still had influential commitments inside the leadership class would do no help to actually restore order. And at that point, the prophecies of Yarvin became very, very real. Get him rock for $3 USA. Normie Discourse is dead. I think you mean he said Normie Discord is dead. Normie Discordia is certainly not dead. The normies are very discordant. Normie Discourse is dead, but is it true of elites? Analytic Phil seems more open to Aristotle Thomas than many chuds. Analytic philosophy seems more open to Aristotle and Thomas, and I think Chud's classical education have piqued some interest. Dark Elf Yarvin even went to church. Yeah, look, I mean, we're going to get an influx of people from the disaffected elite that will join our cause, and we have to be ready to integrate them. It's not our job to bend over backwards to make this happen, but it is something that that we should expect. I don't think that discourse inside the right wing is very much alive, which is what makes Substack such an interesting place. And things where like discourse is still happening on Substack. It is a place where discourse is still happening. Now, is the left really a presence in that? Not really. Substack discourse is mainly between the rationalists and the moderates and the far right wingers. The left really does not have any presence in that world. They're in their own kind of filter bubbles. But I expect many people to be turning further to the right as time goes on. Cool Guy for $5. Sorry, Dave. It's a Wonderful Life is not just a bad movie. It is super cringe. It is the conservative worldview as well as the shitlib light worldview. Oh man, big disagree here. The whole idea of It's a Wonderful Life is that I'm getting a vitalist sense here. There are roles for Christian supermen, for great men, for Constantines and King Louis, and great men who stand astride the world and make it their own. There is absolutely a place in the Christian worldview for that. But that's not what we are in some sense contemplating that a little bit when Christmas comes, in terms of the fact that we're waiting for a king in Advent. But I think the real spirit of Christmas is to kind of be humbled also about how the smallest things in the world can be in one moment as important to that plan as the biggest person inside of it. And we just can't lose sight of that essential nature of the small things in the world. It is such a spiritual power, humility in that sense, that I think we lose sight of it, and we really lose everything that makes our civilization what it is, and that makes life worth living. Isaac Young says, Merry Christmas, Dave. Thanks. We'll look to have you on the podcast sometime in the near future. Cool Guy for $3 said, have you considered doing a live stream with Emplemon and Tantris Humble? They're really brilliant. I have never heard of Emplemon or Tantris Humble, but man, they have got impronounceable names. Almost like, are they anagrams? Like, should I be decoding this? I mean, talk about a Lewis Carroll, or if ever there was one. Chai Squared for $10 says, Merry Christmas. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the donation. John N. McGowan says, I recently got an in real life War Games Club organized and joined my church as a formal member. I wanted to thank you always for pushing to actually getting engaged with the local community. It convinced me. Merry Christmas. Well, thank you so much. Well, that you're doing that is worth more to me than the donation, but thank you very much for the donation. I don't really have time for wargaming anymore. The best I can manage is trying to corner a friend or a family member into playing a game of Blood Bowl or Space Hulk with me when we on the off chance that we have free time, which is very hard to come by. But I do kind of like, it's kind of weird. Just like Arch Warhammer and Sargon are kind of like looking at the SJW takedowns of 2025 as kind of like old fogies of the movement. I kind of feel the same way. I like looking at it in the distance and thinking about how it was. Well, I mean, I was never really a big war gamer. I mean, I was in grad school. Even when I was in grad school, I spent most of my time doing like church activities. But it's always good to kind of remember those times, and maybe there will be a time when we have so much community built up that you can actually shoot the shit and play war games with people who see the world the same way you do when we're working together towards solutions. But we have a lot of work to do until then. Teal Bucks Day Chardon for $5. I don't think that struggle to act like you inhabit a moral world or keep the implications present in your mind is unique to modernity. What might be is a sense that you should adopt whatever morality you already live up to, and that is more authentic. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, like, I could do that too. I could just say, like, my morality is entirely transactional, uh, that is easy to do in a certain sense. But I feel like that's not very useful for my audience. Uh, an audience needs to have an understanding of creators as a constant force. I should be able to give all of you guys 20 principles that I live by and that are the core of my ideology. You should be able to put me in a box. I mean, in being able to be boxed or conceptualized by my audience, in some sense limits my ability to sell myself as, like, because I'm going to talk about the things that I'm interested in on these live streams. It's more or less a tradition. Being boxed up is something that is, but at the same time, while it makes you less interesting for the algorithm, it's sort of essential for developing relationships. Uh, People need to know what I value, what I sacrifice for, and what I'm interested in talking about, because that's the whole point of being in a community. If you're not a known quantity in a community, no one can really develop a relationship with you because you're too flighty. Yeah, so I think everyone is kind of moving in their own direction. Anyway, getting a text from my wife. She's angry at something in the chat. We'll have to deal with that later because I can't read this while also reading the super chats. Cool Guy for $4 USA. I don't believe that people like Vivek and boomers are selling anything per se. Am I on the right one here? Cool guy for $4. I don't believe that people like Vivek and boomers are selling anything per se. It seems to be a genuine belief in American exceptionalism. They are being a brick wall that protects America from you. Uh, no, I mean, like, that's what the boomers believe. Yes, you are correct that the boomers believe that by being individualists, they are shielding America from people like me because they believe that people like me are going to destroy the illusion that created American exceptionalism. That is what boomers believe. Vivek does not believe that. Vivek does not believe that. There's no way Vivek believes that sincerely. He is pretending he believes that so you hand power over to him and so that he can use that power to essentially make his own side more better positioned inside North America. That I don't believe for a second Vivek genuinely believes what he is saying. We have evidence of him switching positions, and the narrative he has about his own past makes absolutely zero sense. It looks like it's a series of scams. I'm sorry, it does. And I'm getting really big Dinesh D'Souza vibes from him. Maybe I shouldn't say that, right? But Dinesh D'Souza was always someone I felt was kind of a little bit of a con artist. When it was popular to be Christian, he was Christian. When it was popular to be a neocon, he was a neocon. When it was popular to be Protestant, he was Protestant. And he just moves, and there's no. It appears like these principles are just adopted and discarded way too easily. I don't feel like I'm getting an actual vision of the person. I feel like I'm being sold a package of goods. And but the boomers, the boomers, there's a lot of sincere believers there. Teal Buxley Chardon says this donation is on behalf of the Giant Art Productions in collaboration with Freakman Foundation in celebration of Geo's 33rd birthday. May he grow ever more senile over many decades. Well, I'm a big fan of Geo from Giant Art Productions. I love the podcast he does with The Prudentialist. I don't always catch it, but I really love their work. So everyone go check them out. Ben White for $5 USA. Merry Christmas, Dave. I've taken into heart your advice about making friends with men first before pursuing women. Besides going to mass every week, what should I do to meet like-minded individuals for real-life community building? God bless. Well, I did an article on this about kind of meeting male friends, and you want to find passions, things that you do well, and that require other men to do them, and then once you find something that you enjoy doing and that kind of has a community built around it, kind of make it part of your person. And I always believe that friends stem from that. If you have something that you're passionate about, that you believe in, that creates good for humanity, I mean, it can be something indulgent like board gaming, but it's always better if it's something that's a little bit more outwardly facing. Then I think that friends naturally come from those kind of beliefs. And that's how you develop community. Or, if you want to piggyback off our efforts, you can look into basket weaving or the OGC. I will always kind of show those organizations. Or, I mean, the exit group too, but I think that's more for an older set than you are, Ben. It's I think it's more like homesteaders, and it has kind of a large hurdle because of that. Homesteaders and entrepreneurs is kind of more the exit group scene. All right, Nerve and V-Maker for $5. What is the difference between a person whose life is defined by the arts and one whose life is defined by consumer products? When does art become a consumer product and vice versa? Well, hardest questions last. I mean, this gets to the great crisis of the 20th century that Roger Scruton pointed out, which was the problem of kitsch and art. And, back in the day, the art was very linked to the object because you would make one copy of something and it would be very, very hard to replicate flawlessly. But in the 20th century, you could just print infinite copies of things, and also you could make copies of things with slight variations and still preserve the quality of the thing technically. So art constantly has to struggle. The idea of art is it's supposed to facilitate a spiritual experience. And this problem's only doubled with the whole generative AI phenomenon that's going on right now. I mean, you can't distinguish between a Renaissance piece of art and one that's faked by an AI. And does it really matter? I mean, it's like, okay, I can be inspired by a Michelangelo or a fake Michelangelo, even though the fake Michelangelo was generated without consciousness. I can be inspired by a snowflake. And the snowflake was, I mean, I guess you could say it was formed by universal consciousness of the laws of physics through God. But it's the same story. Humans, what they want in art is they want to have a singular spiritual experience that challenges them and kind of brings them to some kind of higher consciousness that lifts them out of the consciousness that they ordinarily deal in life and then takes it to a higher level. Once art becomes a consumer product, it seeks to kind of anesthetize you, right? And it's too comforting. It just cycles you back into the same forms of thought that you've always been in. It doesn't kind of try to lift you out and point you to a larger spiritual reality. And when consumer products are confused with real art, that's when it becomes kitsch. And that's essentially when kitsch is more or less the same thing as we call slop. It's procedurally generated. It's done to anesthetize you, and it does not uplift you or make you stronger. It essentially weakens you. One last one from Nerve AMV Maker. To be a man is precisely to be responsible. It is to feel shame at the sight of what seems to be unmerited misery. It is to take pride in a victory won by one's comrades. It is to feel when sitting one stone that one is contributing to the building of the world. Anton de Saint-Exupéry, Wind, Sand, and Stars. Well, I mean, that I can see, I don't know that author, but I recognize these sentiments because they sound very much in line with what Aristotle was talking about when he talked about the virtue of loving what is good and hating what is evil, and then building that into your own character. A very Aristotelian perspective, and very much appreciated. And that's kind of what we should be taking. I mean, school shooters are very un-Aristotelian. They're very un-Christian. They communicate a kind of transactional understanding of fame that is, for lack of a better word, kind of disgusting. So with that, I think we are done with the entropy chats. Now I'll go on to read Psalm 89. Woe, is it a long one, but this is the Christmas psalm, right? Psalm 89. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make it known thy faithfulness to the generations. For I have said, mercy shall be built up from ever. Thy faithful shall they establish in the very heavens. I have made a covenant with thy chosen. I have sworn unto David my servant. Thy seed will establish forever and build up thy throne to all generations. And the heaven shall praise thy wonders, O Lord, thy faithfulness also in the congregation of the saints. For who in the heaven can be compared unto the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty may be likened unto him? God is greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints, and to be had in reverence of all them that are about him. O Lord, God of hosts, who is a strong Lord like unto thee, or to thy faithfulness round about thee? Thou rulest the raging sea. When the waves therefore arise, thou is still among them. Thou hast broken Rahab to pieces, as one that is slain. Thou hast scattered thine enemies with thine strong arms. The heavens are thine, the earth is also thus, as the world in the fullness of thee. Thou hast founded them. The north and the south has created them. Tabor and Hermon shall rejoice in thy name. Thou hast a mighty arm, strong as thy hand, and high is thy right hand. Justice and judgment are the habitation of thine throne. Mercy and truth shall go before thy face. Blessed is the people that know the joyful sound. They shall walk, O Lord, in the light of thy countenance. In thy name shall they rejoice all the days of their life, and in thy righteousness shall they be exalted. For thou art the glory of their strength, and in thy favor our horn shall be exalted. For the Lord is our defense, and the Holy One of Israel is our King. Thou shalt speakest in vision of thy Holy One, and sayest, I have help upon one that is mighty. I have exalted one chosen out of the people. I have found David my servant with my holy oil, and I anoint him. With whom my hand shall be established, my arm shall strengthen him. For the enemy shall not exact upon him, nor the son of wickedness afflict him. And I will beat down his foes before his face, and plague them that hate him. But my faithfulness and my mercy shall be with him, and in my name shall his horn be exalted. I will set his hand also in the sea, and his right hand in the river. He shall cry unto me, Thou art my Father, my God, my rock and my salvation. Also I will make him my firstborn higher than the kings of the earth. My mercy will keep him forevermore, and my covenant shall stand fast with him. His seed also will I make endure forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. If his children forsake my laws and walk not in my judgment, if they break my statutes and keep not my commandments, then I will visit their transgressions with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. Nevertheless, my loving kindness will I not utterly take from him, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. My covenant will not break, nor alter from the things that have gone out of my lips. Once I have sworn by my holiness that I will not lie unto David. His seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. It shall be established forever as the moon and as the faithful witness in heaven. But thou hast cast off and abhorred, thou hast been wroth of thine anointed. Thou hast made void the covenant of thine servant. Thou hast profaned his crown by casting it to the ground. Thou hast broken down all the hedges. Thou hast brought his strongholds to ruin. All that passes by the way spoils him. He is a reproach to his neighbors. Thou hast set up his right hand in his adversaries, and hast made his enemies rejoice. Thou hast turned the edge of his sword, and hast made him to stand in battle. Thou hast made his glory to cease, and cast his throne down to the ground. The days of his youth have been shortened. Thou hast covered him with shame. How long, Lord, wilt thou hide thyself forever? Shall thy wrath burn like fire? Remember how short my time is, wherefore thou hast made all men in vain. What man is he that liveth and not see death? Shall he deliver his soul from the hand to the grave? Lord, where are thy former loving kindnesses, which thou swearest to David in thy truth? Remember, Lord, reproach of thine servants, how I do bear in my bosom the reproach of all the mighty people. Wherewithin thine enemies have been reproached, O Lord, wherein they have been reproached in the footsteps of thine anointed. Blessed be the Lord forever. Amen. Amen. With that, guys, thank you for joining me on this last podcast of the year, probably. The Wonderful Life, Fiddler's Green podcast number 67. I will see you guys again in the new year. Have a wonderful Christmas, a Merry Christmas, and a wonderful rest of the season. Good night.